Welcome back to A Smarter Way to Retire. I'm Tony Leonardi, your host, and today we're diving into step 8 of our retirement planning process, analyzing your current investment portfolio. So by now, you should have built your financial model, defined your risk tolerance, set your expectations for retirement. But here's the big question. Does your current investment portfolio align with your goals? Said another way, will your investments get you where you want to go? Today, we're going to break down how to evaluate what you have, determine if it's working for you, and make adjustments if necessary. So let's get started. The first step is understanding your portfolio's role. Your investment portfolio isn't or shouldn't be just a random collection of stocks, bonds, funds. It's a tool designed to support your long-term financial goals. Every asset you own should serve a purpose in your plan, be it generating income, preserving capital, or growing your wealth. If your portfolio is just something you've accumulated over time without any strategy, which is often the case, now's the time to take a step back and assess if it actually fits your retirement needs. And it doesn't really matter how old you are or how close or how far from retirement you are. Your investments should have a purpose. There should be a strategy tied to them that's designed to get you where you want to go. I like to quote the great philosopher Yogi Berra. He said, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. So when it comes to retirement planning, you really don't want to end up someplace else, do you? So I like to think of your portfolio like a recipe. If a great dish calls for 12 ingredients, let's say, and you only have 6 of those ingredients in the house, it's probably not going to turn out very well. If you have all 12 of the ingredients, but you don't use the right measurements, how will your dish turn out? Probably not very good. You can't use 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of salt, etc. That just won't work. But that's exactly what a lot of investors do. They accumulate a lot of stuff in varying arbitrary amounts, which makes for a bad recipe. Investing is like cooking. You have to have the right mix in the right proportions in order to make something delicious. So key factors to analyze. 1, diversification. Everyone's familiar with the word diversification, but are you properly spread across different asset classes? People typically think of only stocks, bonds, and cash as asset classes, sometimes alternative investments, but that's not all there is to diversification. We use roughly a dozen different asset classes or ingredients in our recipe. There are domestic stocks, but there are also international stocks and emerging markets. There are large companies, there are small and mid-sized companies. There are growth-oriented companies, and there are companies that are considered more value-oriented or dividend-paying companies. And the list goes on. Again, like ingredients in a recipe. Sometimes it's the small addition of an unusual ingredient that makes all the difference in the recipe. For example, has anyone ever put a little touch of cinnamon or nutmeg in your lasagna? Give it a try. I think you might be surprised. Factor 2 is the risk versus return in your portfolio. So does your portfolio reflect the level of risk you're comfortable with? So we talked about risk tolerance in an earlier episode. Liquidity. Do you have access to enough cash if needed? And cost efficiency. Are there fees in your accounts that eat into your returns? How about tax efficiency? Are you minimizing unnecessary tax burdens? There's a concept called tax location that is critical in terms of being tax efficient. Are you locating your assets tax efficiently? I recently recorded a webinar on tax planning and retirement where I talk a lot about asset location and tax efficiency and other tax strategies in retirement. And the recorded webinar is available on my YouTube channel if you're interested. It's easy to think that more investments mean more diversification, but that's not always the case. Owning 20 mutual funds that all invest in the same types of stocks isn't really diversified, it's just redundant. I've had clients come see me where they have lots of different funds and investments. They'll tell me something like, well, Tony, I have money at Fidelity, and I have some money at Vanguard and Oppenheimer, and let's say American funds. So I must be diversified, right? But after a quick analysis, we find that they own practically the same stocks in all of their accounts. So working with different firms or with different advisors doesn't necessarily give you diversification. In fact, in my experience, you could get less diversification the more you try to spread out because you lose coordination. If one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing, often they're doing the same thing. So don't be fooled into thinking you're properly diversified because you have a lot of stuff. The next step is a concept called the efficient frontier. The efficient frontier is one of my favorite investment concepts, and it's a concept in investing that helps you visualize the best possible return for a given level of risk. So visualize the efficient frontier as an upside down Nike swoosh, where it sweeps up from the lower left corner up into the upper right corner on your screen. Can you see it in your mind? Again, think of it as the Nike swish, swishing up from the lower left up into the upper right. If your portfolio sits below that line, that's the efficient frontier line. If your portfolio sits below that line, you're likely taking on too much risk for too little return. Remember, we want to optimize, if possible, that risk-return relationship. The goal is to position your investments in a way that gives you the highest probability of success while staying within your comfort zone. So imagine two portfolios, one with a 6% average return and a moderate amount of risk, and the other with the same 6% average return but much higher risk. Which one would you rather own? The efficient frontier helps us make smart trade-offs in an attempt to optimize performance. So I love the efficient frontier as a great visual way to understand what's going on with your portfolio from a risk-return perspective. Look up Markowitz and Sharp Modern Portfolio Theory on the internet if you're interested and you want to take a deeper dive into this topic. The next step is, what if your portfolio doesn't align with your plan, which we often see on the efficient frontier? Often we find a disconnect in a couple of different areas. We find that your portfolio, when we plot it on that efficient frontier, is not within your stated risk tolerance. And this is not unusual because most investors don't have the tools to measure the risk of their portfolio. In other words, they can't quantify how much risk they're taking. And we find that their portfolio is often outside of their risk tolerance. They're often taking on more risk than they realize because they can't quantify that number. Second, we find that the portfolios are often not structured efficiently, so they're below that efficient frontier line. And if the portfolio falls below the efficient frontier line, it's meaning that likely you're not being adequately compensated for the amount of risk you're taking. Because isn't that what we're doing when we invest? You're purchasing risk, and you're hoping that you're being adequately compensated for the amount of risk that you're purchased. If your investments don't align with your plan, you have two choices. One, you can adjust your investments to match your risk tolerance and your goals, which is usually recommended. Or two, you can adjust your expectations if your returns aren't enough to support your plan. This is why it's critical to know the rate of return that you need, not just the rate of return that you want. If your plan requires an 8% return, but your portfolio is only built for a 5% return, that's going to be a problem. You either need to take on more risk, which adds more volatility, or you can build a more efficient portfolio, or adjust your spending expectations. The right balance is the key. So let's talk about the impact of chasing returns. Many investors make the mistake of seeking higher returns without considering the volatility that comes with it. More return often means more ups and downs, more volatility, which can actually reduce your probability of success if you react emotionally during those downturns, or if you experience a lot of volatility early on in your retirement. Early volatility in retirement, when you're taking distribution from your accounts, could cause a snowball effect, which could be devastating to your portfolio. So a portfolio that stays consistent and aligned with your goals is far more valuable than one that swings wildly in pursuit of higher gains. Remember, investing isn't just about maximizing returns, it's about maximizing successful outcomes. And that's the key. We want successful outcomes. A 10% return doesn't help if you panic and sell during the downturn, or if that volatility comes early in retirement. So let's take a fresh look at your portfolio. Does it align with your financial model? Is it well diversified, and is it cost and tax efficient? Does it provide the return you need without excessive risk? If you're unsure on any of these issues, I would recommend that you get a professional portfolio review. Sometimes an outside perspective can reveal risks or inefficiencies that you haven't noticed. Remember, your investment should serve your retirement plan, not the other way around. So if you're not sure where you stand, take action now before market conditions force you to make rushed or emotional decisions. So that wraps up today's episode. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. And if you want a deeper dive into your own portfolio, visit my website, leonardifamilywealthcare.com, and schedule a free consultation. Next time, we'll tackle step 9, measuring your current probability of success. You don't want to miss that one, so we'll see you soon.
Securities offered through Mosaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC. Mosaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Mosaic Wealth. The opinions expressed herein are for general information only and is not necessarily the opinions of Mosaic Wealth or its representatives. Investing is subject to risk, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. It is not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Please consult your financial professional, attorney, or tax advisor with regards to your individual situation.